2021, Bloomberg cited a report from the global consulting firm. Mark Kensian calculation showing that China has surpassed the United States, the other country with the largest asset. Specifically, China's net asset value increased 17-fold, from $7 trillion in 2000 to $120 trillion. During the same period, U.S. net assets doubled to $90 trillion, while global net assets rose from $156 trillion to $514 trillion, with 68% coming from real estate. Although over the past decades, China has made significant contributions to global economic growth, the rapid growth of the country's assets still primarily comes from real estate. Though China's growth will become more stable as the country shifts its momentum from investment to consumption. However, real estate issues will not disappear soon and may remain a key dimension in the next decade. This poses a major risk to the country's economy, as sustainability in the real estate sector is very low, because this will make fewer people able to own homes and increase the risk of a financial crisis, similar to the debt crisis of the real estate developer Evergrande. And indeed, recently, domestic and foreign newspapers have reported on the risk of China's third bond default. The country faces many financial risks, especially the massive debt at global levels, along with severe real estate liquidity issues. According to many experts, if new growth drivers do not emerge, China risks another real estate bond default. So, what is the truth about the mainland's bond default? Let's explore in today. In finance, a bond is a type of security where the issuer owes the holder a sum of money and has an obligation to provide cash flow to the creditor. For example, repaying the bond principal on the maturity date as well as interest over a specified. The timing and amount of cash provided vary depending on the economic value emphasized, thus creating different types of bonds. Typically, interest is paid at fixed intervals, usually every 6 months or once a year. Therefore, bonds are a form of lending and also provide borrowers with external capital to finance long-term investments. Government bonds. This is a type of bond issued by the government to support public spending. It usually includes a commitment to periodic repayments, called coupon payments, and repayment of the face value on the maturity. Government bonds may be denominated in foreign currency or the government's domestic. Countries with less stable economies tend to price their bonds in the currency of a country with a more stable economy. However, all bonds carry default risk, meaning the possibility that the government will be unable to pay bondholders. Bonds from countries with less stable economies are generally considered to have higher risk. International credit rating agencies provide ratings for each country's bonds. The giant awakens. Since the start of economic reforms in 1978 under Deng Xiaoping, China has developed into a highly diversified economy and one of the most important players in international trade. As of the end of 2023, the mainland is the world's second largest economy with a total GDP of $17.66 trillion, accounting for about 16.8%. With a population of 1.41 billion, China's per capita GDP reached $12,524. In terms of purchasing power parity, the country leads the world with a figure of $32.93 trillion, and per capita GDP based on purchasing power parity also reached $23,300. China is a major manufacturing and goods exporting economy, which is why the country is also known as the world's factory. Currently, it is the world's largest producer and consumer of agricultural products, with about 300 million people working. Almost all arable land is used to grow food crops. This has made China one of the world's largest rice producers. At the same time, it is also one of the top suppliers of wheat, corn, soybeans, tea, oilseeds, pork, and fish. In addition, major non-food crops such as cotton and other fiber plants also bring China significant foreign trade revenue. According to the United Nations World Food Program, as of the end of 2020, its population with only 7% of the world. The country also has huge natural resource reserves, estimated to be worth about $23 trillion, with coal and rare earths accounting for over the years. China has intensified the exploitation of minerals, both to meet domestic demand and for export. However, currently, due to environmental reasons, they aim to shift the energy structure from heavy reliance on coal, which accounts for about 70 to 75% of energy, to diversifying fuel sources, using petroleum, natural gas, renewable energy. Additionally, according to many estimates, the total global rare earth reserves are 110, but China alone has 44 million tons, accounting for about 40% of the world's total reserve, with the remainder belonging to Vietnam and some countries in South America. With massive reserves and advanced refining technology, China dominates the world's rare earth supply. And this is also a key card for this country in dealing with the United States and allied nations like Japan or South Korea. Thanks to its rare earth resources, the billion-people country is gradually shifting to high-tech industry, renewable energy, telecommunications equipment, and infra. The mainland holds a solid global position in industrial manufacturing, and some of its companies lead the world in steel, solar energy, and telecommunications accessories. As of 2023, the industrial sector accounts for 40% of China's GDP. From 2010 to the present, the billion-people country has produced more industrial goods than any other nation, accounting for about one-fifth of the world's total industrial output. Particularly in the automotive manufacturing industry, factories have been built practically across them. As a result, in 2023, car export volume increased by 58% compared to. Thanks to this, China surpassed Japan to become the world's largest car export. Additionally, the tourism service industry also brings enormous revenue to the billion people. With the number of World Heritage Sites second only to Italy, tourism is one of the fastest growing sectors in the economy, and is also one of the industries with global competitive advantages. However, when the COVID pandemic broke out, China's economy was severely impacted by intense relations with the United States, as well as its allies. Consequently, the number of international flights to China, for both business and tourism purposes, declined continuously, since lifting the strict anti-COVID-19 measures at the end of 2022. Economic activities have begun to revive. The economic situation has shown improvement, but the recovery process remains quite fragile and still faces many difficulties and challenges, including weak consumer demand and social expectations, overcapacity in some sectors, as well as bottlenecks in domestic logistics. With the implementation of many policies to stabilize growth, efforts in technological innovation, the recovery has gained enough momentum for China's economy to achieve a growth rate of 5.2% in 20, higher than the government's target of 5%. As expectations, the country. However, these figures are just a facade to cover up the weaknesses of an economy with many problems. The economy is sick. Economists predict that the mainland's economy will slow down, with growth at 4.5% or lower this year. This is not the result of a cyclical recession, but a severe decline that can last for many years. Economic experts call it long-term stagnation. After a period of isolation due to the COVID-19 pandemic, China reopened in December 2020. Since then, consumers in this country have developed a new trend of being increasingly cautious as, before the pandemic, people were willing to spend on services, tourism, and real estate. But starting in 2023, instead of spending, they had decided to deposit most of their income in that. According to the latest nationwide survey by Mark Kinsey, for Chinese consumers, about 58% of urban households say they want to save money for rainy days, meaning accumulating funds to prepare for uncertainties. This is the highest level since 2014 and is also 9% higher than in 2019, before the pandemic outbreak. The increasing trend of Chinese consumers saving money rather than spending is clearly reflected in the rapid growth of savings deposits. As Bank of China, in the last quarter of 2023, the country. Additionally, as mentioned above, China has surpassed Japan to become the world's leading car producer. This is because businesses receive state support. This has led to peak price cuts for electric cars and reduced profits for enterprises, while also causing importing countries to be cautious and initiate anti-dumping investigations. Besides the home appliance industry, many factories are operating at only half capacity or less due to weak demand in China. Therefore, businesses in this country are striving to export more to compensate, further prompting importing countries to implement restrictive measures. Moreover, although Chinese people still travel, they now opt for cheaper meals and more budget-friendly hotels. All of this shows that the economic situation of the billion-people country has many problems, forcing its leadership to adopt reasonable policy. A completely new men's haircut experience, relieving work fatigue and baldness sign. Combo haircut and wash in 10 steps, discounted all week. Only premium service, cutting-edge technology. 10-step haircut and shampoo combo, only one. The reason the economy of a billion-person country risks long-term stagnation is that its growth has been driven by investment in physical, especially real estate. This is further funded by an inefficient banking system. Now, it seems those forecasters were right as China is grappling with rising debt levels. Stocks are falling, consumer confidence is weaker, the workforce is shrinking due to declining birth rates, and the real estate market is deteriorating. On paper, the Beijing government appears to have a very manageable debt load for a country so reliant on investment for growth. According to the official definition, in 2023, government debt generally includes the debt of both central and accounts for about 55% of the country's total GDP, equivalent to approximately 9. This rate is equivalent to that of developed countries like Australia or South Korea. However, the GDP per capita in these two countries is Bank of China, the country. With the issuance of a total of approximately $10 trillion in bonds, an increase of 14.8%. Among them, the interbank bond market issued bonds were $8.871 trillion, and the exchange market issued bonds were $1.328 trillion. The issuance of bonds aims to support local governments. However, too much of anything is not good, and this policy has caused the mainland's 2023 budget to run a deficit of up to. Many experts believe that the debt and bond issuance are just a drop in the ocean for a massive economy like China. Investors are grappling with the vague stimulus measures the government has implemented for the country's struggling economy. Looking at the overall government debt, including related funds, provides a slightly better explanation for China's fiscal conservatism. Coup de tong bai tu chu take no trung quat tap and bin dang lam wa cash tap chun kian lu. After the military, his top priority is political control over the economy, thereby further blurring the line between the Chinese state and the ruling Communist Party. Part of that change involves reducing the influence of the Prime Minister's office. This is the second highest position in a state's political system and is a person with an important role related to the establishment of economic policies. Under the leadership of Xi Jinping, economic policy has emphasized stability and the goal of common prosperity, to narrow the gap between the rich and the poor, as well as between the wealthy coastal provinces and the less developed inland. However, according to many scholars, such a centralized decision is not always a good omen for development. Accordingly, when the Prime Minister is the manager of the economy, he will rely on experts in various fields. But the power to make policies gradually fell into the hands of a political specialist like Mr. Xi, and he no longer trusted the Prime, as well as the team of experts. Therefore, the survival of the economy, along with the future of billions of people, lies in the hands of one person. Belief that Xi Jinping. But over time, it will turn China into a modern-era feudal and centralized state. Returning to the bond debt, even the figure just mentioned above cannot fully illustrate the immense risk to the local government financing vehicles, abbreviated as LGFVs. It typically exists in the form of an investment company that provides capital to fund real estate development and other local infrastructure projects. LZFV can borrow money from banks so they can borrow on the open market by selling municipal investment bonds or municipal corporate bonds. This type of bond is typically structured as an asset management product and is sold to individuals. It is precisely these covert financing tools that have enabled provinces to thrive throughout decades of growth fueled by China's. These funds have allowed localities to construct impressive projects, making the whole world admire them. However, localities have heavily relied on real estate for development, making the property sector a pillar of China's growth. At its peak, this aim revived the economy for many localities, but then the real estate bubble burst, creating more and more real estate developers on the brink of bankruptcy. Here, home sales have been continuously declining. In 2023, only about 9 million units were sold, which is the lowest level since 2012 and significantly lower than the 14 million units in 2021. This has created a distortion for the economy, as the real estate sector accounts for about 30% of the gross domestic product and nearly 70% of household assets in China. This has brought the risk of bond default dangerously close. China is concealing the risk of a bond default in 2025. If this actually occurs, it will be the third bond default in a decade for the world's second largest economy.
Has issued a negative outlook on the country. Another agency,
DBRS Morningstar, downgraded China's government debt rating in November 2023.
In addition, according to S&P Global Ratings,
a company with over 1,400 credit analysts and more than 1.2 million credit ratings has issued a new warning regarding the Chinese economy. This company's recent analysis indicates that billions of people are at hidden risk of defaulting on bonds in 2025.
According to Mr. George Chang, head of S&P Global's China branch, what policymakers really need to monitor is whether current directives are creating distorted incentives in the economy.
Accordingly, in recent years, the Chinese government has employed strong measures to prevent financial risks, particularly the massive global debt, alongside a gloomy and severely illiquid real estate market.
Experts believe that Beijing's somewhat heavy-handed approach could trigger the next wave of defaults.
The most dangerous is the method of seizing real estate assets, or the three red lines, which almost completely eliminate the ability of medium-sized real estate. Under this mechanism, over 6,000 real estate projects across China are eligible for bank loan.
However,
Minister of Housing and Urban Rural Development Ni Hong stated that the government will not bail out companies in severe crisis. Therefore, the banking system controlled by the Chinese state has rapidly shifted priorities over the past year. Specifically, very few loans have been granted to real estate developers and home buyers.
Instead, loans for industrial companies to build factories have surged.
This led to a 6.5% increase in manufacturing investment last year, while real estate fell by 9 points. But since most Chinese household assets are in real estate, any bond default wave would have widespread repercussions.
Charles Chang also believes the bigger issue for the government is whether the real estate market and prices can stabilize.
That could mitigate some negative impacts on the assets of the majority of Chinese citizens. On the other hand, the oversized role of real estate in the economic structure is a double-edged sword. As the sector accounts for up to 30% of GDP, it is too bloated to be fully rescued.
Humorous.
And only maintain a moderate level of real estate's contribution to national GDP.
Who would benefit if China defaults on its bonds?
It is difficult to determine which party would gain from a third Chinese bond default. But clearly, with debts reaching trillions of dollars, it cannot be taken lightly as investors see this as a financial burden on the Chinese government. Although separate from government debt, including bond debt pushes China's government debt ratio to about 130% of GDP.
Higher than emerging markets like Indonesia, the Philippines, and even India.
This debt level is comparable to developed markets that have implemented quantitative easing, including Eurozone countries like France, Italy, Germany, and other developed Western nations like the UK, US, and Canada.
Accordingly, if growth slows further, local governments will not be the only ones seeking support.
Then, corporate debt would add another 123% to the total debt to GDP ratio. A large portion of that is from state-owned enterprises. Additionally, household debt, mainly mortgages, also accounts for 61% of GDP. Overall, if all are combined, China's total national debt exceeds 300% of GDP, a truly alarming figure. High debt burdens will limit the government's fiscal capacity, preventing Xi Jinping from rolling out bolder stimulus measures. And weakening the effectiveness of support policy. If the country experiences a third bond default, it would be like a heavy blow to an already vulnerable economy. This would further expose the inefficiency of China's banking system and somewhat arbitrary management. And more importantly, worsen the image of a billion-person country in the eyes of it. Against the backdrop of India's strong rise, with its young population and high population growth rate, along with promising, low-cost emerging markets like Indonesia, Vietnam, and the Philippines.
The Chinese bond default would give investors more reason to shift capital flows to more stable countries.
And this would be an opportunity for East Asian countries to gradually replace China as the world's factory. As for the US and its allies, their companies have invested considerable capital in a billion-person. If this lucrative market is adversely affected by a default, profits will certainly decline. However, in the long term, US companies could bring production back home, and the US will continue to maintain its global indebtedness. So, in your opinion, could a Chinese yuan default happen? Please leave your thoughts in the comments.
Goodbye and see you in the next videos.